Before I get into this unfortunately, admittedly negative video, I just want to say thank you because I finished editing this video in particular and looked on my YouTube analytics and saw a ridiculous number. This is just insane. 2,000 people, and I can't thank you enough, and it's all because of you guys, so thank you so much. With that said, onto the video. This is a video that I really didn't think I was going to be making. I didn't really want to talk about this, but this is coming from the point of view of a frustrated consumer. If you don't know me, I cover FPS games, usually Battlefield, some VR stuff, but also you'll see if you look at my channel history and what I've covered, DayZ is a big part of that, and I was looking for a game to maybe replace DayZ in the future, if that was even a possibility, and this game the day before seemed like it was going to be covering that base. Maybe it was naive of me, but I was excited. This seemed like an open world MMO zombie survival game that was going to fill that gap of a game that, let's be honest, is quite old. I love DayZ, but it's got tired mechanics that have been around for ages, broken mechanics like the cars that just don't really work properly, and from the snippets of the day before that we saw from Studio Fntastic, it looked like they were going to fix all that. They were going to bring in a new title in the zombie survival genre that remedied really everything that I had an issue with DayZ. But it seems like I'm going to be sticking with DayZ for a little while, because today we got our first extended look of gameplay, of 10 minutes of gameplay, of the day before. And I'm going to be honest, I wasn't impressed. It's clear that a lot of work has gone into this project, but what was shown off today doesn't instill me with confidence. Not in the slightest. In fact, it kind of does the opposite. I'm sure you're familiar with it, but if you aren't, the day before has gone through a lot of controversy. From claiming that the game wasn't even real, to having some sort of legal trouble and then having that resolved the next day, to being delisted from Steam, and even having one of their own developers claim that they didn't know if the game was real or not. Even jokingly, that's not a good look. This game has been through some turmoil, to say the least. And as someone following it, it's been really frustrating to try and keep up, and to try and see what's real and what's not. But I've come to the unfortunate conclusion that the day before isn't everything that it was cracked up to be. I'm not a dev, I'm not part of the dev team, I don't know what's happened behind closed doors, but it seems like the dev team came with a vertical slice of this game, pushed for loads of features that were going to be in it, it gained a lot of traction, more than they ever expected, it gained investment, and now it's kind of gotten out of hand. So let me talk you through today and what we saw and why I don't think the game's going to live up to the expectations that people have made of it, which is a really unfortunate truth, and I'd love to be proven wrong. It's clear from today that there is a product to be seen with the day before, but it seems like a downgrade in every sense of the word compared to what we've seen previously. We were promised a 10-minute look at extended gameplay for the day before, and what we ended up with was an extended look of a lot of walking around. Now this, if you're not familiar with this type of genre, is actually commonplace for the survival zombie open world. This whole genre includes a lot of walking around. I mean, look at DayZ. Most of that game is wandering around and looting, but for your first proper showcase for your zombie survival MMO open world game, that's just not going to cut it. The snippets we've seen before have shown loads of different locations, different mechanics, different looting mechanics, different driving mechanics, PvP, and we saw none of that today. We saw looting, we saw some zombie shooting, but the extent of it just wasn't really enough to sell me as a player on this experience at all. I'll hand it to the devs and whoever designed the environments. They seem good. The frame rate seems stable, even though it just seemed to be 2 people on the server. The performance was really good, going from a more rural setting, traveling all the way into a city, and having that have consistent frames, no loading screens, nothing, it's all seamless. That's impressive. But just wandering through these environments isn't quite enough for me. We saw looting mechanics, yes, the inventory looked kind of basic and a little bit weird, and we saw a little bit of the crafting and gunsmith system. Now for me, there wasn't really enough in here to show me what the gameplay loop is even gonna be. Sure, you go around, you loot, you survive, but in DayZ, I'm looking towards building a base. I'm looking towards going for those high-level loot drops, heading on missions with my friends to go and get high-level guns from military bases, and engaging other players in PvP. Today, we saw some customization of weapons, we saw some shooting of walkers or zombies, and that was it. There was no PvP, there was no showing off of loot pools of what you can get from different locations really, or the different types of loot you can get say from a military compound or from a pharmacy, and everything just kind of seemed to be generic. That's the one thing I can give in terms of an adjective to what I saw today was generic. It reminded me of a blend of Ghost Recon, of DayZ, and of World War Z, and that's not a bad thing inherently, but when you're showing off one weapon to your community in action, a couple of zombie models getting killed, your environment, some basic looting mechanics, and a gunsmith that admittedly seemed extensive, only showed off statistics and not any sort of gameplay of what the gunsmith will do when you adjust your weapon. The first zombie we saw was after the gunsmith section, if I recall, so the player, when watching this, has no distinction between how the guns perform before the gunsmith and how they perform after. It just wasn't really enough. And speaking of guns, as I mentioned, we got one singular gun in this whole showcase, if I remember right. One AK-47. Now, I'm no game dev, I don't know if this is a handmade model or a marketplace asset. It could well be either one of those. But when I look at any other trailer for any other zombie game, hell, any other FPS, I will see gameplay of more than one rifle. That is kind of ridiculous. And maybe I'm asking for a lot. Maybe I'm asking for a lot to see vehicle gameplay like we saw in the snippets earlier. Maybe I'm asking a lot to see PvP gameplay with higher stakes. Maybe I'm asking a lot to see loot pools with different guns and different areas with different higher tier ranks of loot. Even if they're not gear scored or anything like that, just saying that, oh, you can get this type of weapon from this military compound. Maybe I'm asking for a lot with that. But there just wasn't a lot of substance to this demo. If you ask me, it seems like they scrambled it together in not very long. Not to mention the random delays with the actual trailer coming out, the fact that this trailer was cancelled indefinitely before yesterday. This all seems thrown together to save face at the last possible second. But ultimately, as a consumer, I can't be too mad because they're not charging me anything. Sure, I can register my interest by wishlisting the game on Steam when it's back up, but I'm not giving them any money. I'm not investing into Fntastic's other services. I'm not pre-ordering. I'm not giving my money to crowdfunding. They're not taking any of my money, and yet it feels like they're building up an image of a game that doesn't exist. And I thought today would get rid of all of those feelings I had if this game isn't real, at least not to the extent that they're pushing it. Because we just didn't see enough today, and that's ultimately where my disappointment is coming from. We didn't see enough. They didn't show off enough to the player base that wants to support their game in terms of any of their gameplay loops. The biggest thing we got was looting, and that is not one of my favourite parts of DayZ, putting it lightly. So yeah, I am slightly frustrated, as a consumer, by the day before. Maybe that's my bad. Maybe I invested too much hope into this title. Maybe I put my expectations too high, but they were built up. The amount of snippets we've seen, the promises we've been given for this game, it built up maybe an unrealistic image in my head and in the rest of the player base's head of what this game was going to be. But I wouldn't really say that's our fault, because the day before ultimately hasn't lived up to everything they said it would be. But what can they actually do to save face here? They've thrown together this seemingly kind of last-minute presentation to show people that they have a product, they have something that they've made and can sell to you when it's ready. But to really push this forward, we're going to need a bit more. Maybe even a demo in single player that showcases some of their mechanics for the player to try out for themselves. Maybe throw in some just basic co-op or something like that, and give the player base a sense of what the game's going to be like. But I'm no expert. This is just my feelings and a rant from a player who's been following this game for a while and has been looking for an alternative to games like DayZ. But it looks like I'm going to be playing DayZ for the foreseeable future. And I'm not too mad about that. I do love DayZ. It's a really solid game, even on console now. But yeah, it sucks. Having a game be built up like this and then kind of fall apart in front of you is a special kind of train wreck that doesn't come along very often. But I do hope that Fntastic can bring this back together, bring us a product that they're proud of and something that we can play and enjoy for years to come. That would be the ideal outcome here, and I hope it does happen, but I don't know if I can see it happening. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the day before. Has it disappointed you? Did that gameplay demo actually live up to your hype? Maybe it did, maybe I'm the minority here, but let me know what you think below in the comments. If you did enjoy today's video, consider subscribing. I cover a lot of FPS content. I cover Battlefield mostly. 2042 is on the up right now, and I've been covering it for the last year or so in terms of updates. I also cover a lot of VR stuff. Stick around if you did enjoy today's video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.